Hey everybody, it's Peter, and this is the Suzuki GSX-8R. It is a phenomenal bike, and this is my riding impressions review of this bike. So you guys have been asking for a while for me to do riding reviews, and I'm breaking them up in two segments now. So what I'm doing is I'm introducing riding impressions, which is where I have a bike like this for about half a day. We go on it, we take a view, you'll see some B-roll of me on the bike, and I talk about what it's like to ride, and then I'll get to riding reviews, which are a little bit more in-depth, and I have the bikes for longer. So you've asked for it, that's what we're getting. So do me a favor, if you've made it this far already, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, hit the comment button, that kind of thing. Leaves nice positive comments. But also, if you just want to help my channel grow, which is what gives me more access, just find a couple videos that you like and watch them to the end. Most of my reviews, I sort of specialize in walk around reviews, but of course I'm able to add all this because you guys are supporting this channel, so I appreciate that. And the more you guys support it, the more I'll try to get you more and more access to things like this. So I'm filming this because McLean Sports gave it to me for the day, so they are absolutely awesome. Link in the description to check them out, and yeah, awesome dealer. All right, let's get going with this review. So let's briefly place this bike in a class. Now this is sort of the new generation of street sport motorcycles. It used to be that super sport motorcycles had a really high component level and street sport level bikes had a lower component level. This one very much is that new breed where it really blends some of that line together. So you still have a street sport riding position, which we'll show you a little bit later, but you do have a bit of a mix, and what it creates is a far better street sport bike than in the past. Absolutely track day capable, but this is what I would call a very versatile everyday bike. It's not quite great for beginners because it's got a lot of power, but boy is this thing easy to drive. Certainly a beginner moving up to this would find no issues. It is extremely confidence inspiring, but it also gives you a little bit of a step up from some of the previous generation of street sport motorcycles, and we'll go through some of that. I'll describe that in this video. So let's start at the front, we'll work our way through. So in my walk around reviews, we always start at the front wheel because you can tell the manufacturer's intent of the bike, and we talk about some of the features and specs, but let's talk about it from a riding perspective. So first of all, you've got the Dunlop Road Sport 2 tires. To me, that is a perfectly fine and very good tire really for what this bike is intended to do. Keep in mind that you can go with stickier tires, but when you move to stickier tires, they tend to need more warming up to get sticky, which is why the Road Sport 2 are perfect for a street sport bike. And you can, like I said, sometimes people find when they upgrade the tires too much, they end up with something that doesn't get as sticky as these ones will because they warm up nice and quickly, and they really do a good job of holding the line. You'll find that this bike really, you can angle it down in a corner and it holds the line perfectly, and that's not just to do with the tires, it also is to do with the suspension. The suspension on this, although non-adjustable, is something that I would say is slightly above average for the class. So generally when I talk about suspension on a bike like this, I kind of give it 1 of 3 ratings. I give it the it's not great, the it's fine, there's nothing special, it's nothing to talk about, or it is worth something to talk about. So this is slightly above, there's nothing to talk about. It's not something that's negative in any way. It's pretty good. So it has that nice firm sport bike feel, but not too firm or too harsh. It absorbs bumps fairly well, but the biggest thing is, as far as a sport riding experience, it really helps you hold the line. So again, it could have a little bit better bump absorption, but again, for the price point, for the class, it's very good, above average for the class, and that's what you get. Now, you do have the radial mount calipers here. This is something that you never used to have on a street sport bike, so you have that style, anyways, of a super sport bike. I will say braking on this bike is very good, very confidence inspiring. You know, certainly no issues there. So tire, suspension, and brakes, all of that leads to great handling, and that's what I really find with this bike. It really is a good handling bike that's fun to ride, and that's something that you don't always find to this level in this class. So the next thing we have to talk about is the engine, transmission, the whole drivetrain of this bike, and I have to admit, this is where some of those street sport bikes differ from the super sport bikes. A lot of, or at least a true super sport bike, will make a lot of its power up top. It has that real rush of power way up top. And a lot of people really look for that in a sport bike, and therefore they end up going to those often 4-cylinder super sport bikes that are generally less comfortable and in my opinion, not as good for the street. This engine has a lot of torque in the midsection. Now, the big difference is when you drive on the streets, that's where you are. You're not up in the high revs. If you're up in the high revs of this, you're speeding, you're well beyond speed limits. But generally speaking, you're in those mid revs. That's where this engine likes to be, and that's where you traditionally are. What I would say about this bike is it feels faster than its horsepower rating would be, because it has that broad torque band right in the middle. So this thing is very enjoyable on the streets. It's actually something I would take to the track as well. Now, some people assume that because it has that strong mid-range that it just dies off on the top end. I wouldn't say it dies off on the top end. Now again, this is a riding impressions review. This wasn't I took it to the track and kept it between 7,000 and 12,000 RPM or whatever the red line is. We'll tell you that in a second here. But it is something that it is really in that street. So yeah, 10,000 RPM or just 9,500 RPM, somewhere there, 9,750, something like that is the RPM. But it's not something you're keeping that 7,000 to 10,000 RPM range. It's something that you're driving that 3 to 4 to 5 and on up. And anywhere from 3,000 RPM up, this thing's got strong torque. We got some noisy trucks going by. Very noisy trucks. But this thing has really strong mid-range, and what that means is that it, like I said, it feels like on the road far more powerful than its horsepower rating would be. Now, a couple things I kind of like and have to talk about. The quick shifter on this bike, I really enjoy it, but it is a bit of an aggressive quick shifter, and you'll find that that's often the case. So if you're zipping through the gears up and down, it works really well. It has that aggressive kind of clunk to it. So when you're zipping through, that's kind of what you want. That if you want a quick shifter to be quick shifting, this has that. There are a couple areas that are harder to describe but easy to kind of perceive, where that aggressive clunking shift or quick shift kind of clunks up aggressively, and it's easier to use the clutch. I actually like the tuning of that the way it is, because the way this works is as you're driving quickly, that quick shifter works very well. And sometimes when you're in 4th gear and you just want to tap it up to 6th gear because you're getting fuel efficiency, it seems to work very smoothly in that section as well. So that's all good. But there are a couple situations where it's just easier or smoother to use the clutch. And to me, I kind of like that tuning. It allows you to still be a traditionally shifted bike when you need it to be, but if you want to be quick and aggressive on the shifts, it works great. Or if you just want to, like I said, upshift those last couple gears, and you're in 4th gear, you want to go up to 6 for fuel efficiency or just to get it in the high gear, it also works well there. So what I would say is the quick shifter is very good for my style of riding, but it's not a fully automatic transmission. You are going to want to clutch every now and then, just in certain RPM situations, and you kind of very quickly figure out what those are, or where the clutch is going to be a little bit smoother. Speaking of the clutch, this has that Suzuki clutch, so it's hard to stall the thing. You just kind of let it out. If you didn't get enough revs, it'll give you some extra. It's got 3 riding modes. You can switch through those riding modes, A, B, and C, which I like to term aggressive, balanced, and conservative. I know Suzuki uses different words for that, but that's kind of how I remember it. One thing I like about this bike is the Suzuki controls. It's extremely easy to switch between A, B, and C, riding mode, aggressive, balanced, and conservative, while you're riding. Some bikes make that just more complicated than it needs to be. This one's very good. Same thing with the traction control levels. You can turn off through 3. I just left it in level 1 for all my riding today, but that aggressive, balanced, and conservative riding position, or riding throttle mapping, is very easy to switch between. A lot of bikes don't make it quite that easy, and that means that you're either losing attention off the road or you're just not shifting between or switching between them. Aggressive certainly allows you to have that aggressive setting. The conservative setting is probably balanced enough to turn this from a sort of an 800-ish cc bike to maybe a 600-ish cc bike, is kind of how it feels. It's still a quick setting, but it does sort of dial it down. I really like driving in that B mode, that sort of balanced mode. The aggressive certainly has an aggressive feel to it, which is good. So there's enough variation between them. I would say that the conservative setting you might only use in the rain. You might only use if you're just very new on this bike or a newer rider, getting used to that. Like I said, this bike, in my opinion, has a little too much power for the beginning rider for me to recommend it. However, this thing is really easy to ride. All right, if we're going to talk about powertrain, we have to talk about that 270-degree crank and talk about that exhaust note. So we'll talk about that. We'll show it to you in the static thing, and then I want to talk about the riding position on this as well, because that is something that is unique and I think very good for a few key reasons. So let's talk about the sound first. So a lot of you love to hear the exhaust in this sort of non-riding type situation where you just rev it up from a stop. I don't love to demonstrate that. One, I haven't got the perfect audio equipment to demonstrate that, and two, most engines sound better under load. So this one I would agree is the same situation. So I'm gonna take my mic off my shirt here. We're gonna start it up here. I'm gonna put the mic down here. So nothing fancy there, nothing crazy, just kind of a fairly quiet exhaust. Let's rev it up for a second. So you can kind of hear the sound there. It didn't rev it too hard. Let's just rev it one more time. All right, we'll kill that down for a second as we talk about that, what it's like when you're riding. So for all the talk of 270-degree cranks and that giving it a nice sound and that kind of thing, it also gives it a nice character. The reality is with this bike is you can hear it when you accelerate and it sounds decent, but honestly when you're riding down the road, 4th gear, 5th gear, 6th gear at, cruising speeds, you really don't hear it. Now for me, I actually view that as a strength. And when I say you don't hear it, what I mean is the wind noise on your helmet is usually the dominant noise over the exhaust note. But for me on a sport bike, I actually kind of think that's okay for the way I ride, because again, a lot of times you're zipping up through your own neighborhood, you're zipping up through some of the same roads every day. People don't hear you come and see you flying by and hear you leave kind of thing. They just see the bike go by. So it does make noise, you can hear it, it makes some nice noise, but I would think that people who really value noise are going to want to switch out that shorty exhaust with something that's going to make a little bit more pleasing and loud noise. It is not a crazy loud bike. Like I said, I appreciate that. Some of you won't, especially on a sport bike. Like I said, it just allows you to kind of creep around and have some fun without announcing your presence to absolutely everyone in the area. But again, if a really loud noise or a better noise is what you want, then yeah, switch out that exhaust and you'll get that. Last thing I want to cover before we wrap up is the general seating position of this bike. Now I will say that this seat, with every sport bike, they always look really thin right there, but this one does have good cush. This is a seat that I would expect to be comfortable for a long time on. It does feel very wide at the back, and for a sport bike, I actually find it quite comfortable. The other thing that's quite impressive about this is the way your legs kind of come here. A lot of times your legs are kind of splayed out with the tank, or they're, they just don't feel exactly perfect. This, to me, is a perfect seating position. Your legs almost feel like they're going straight forward. Anytime you're cornering on this bike, you really feel like you have full body control with your legs on this bike. We'll show you the seating position in just a second, but I wasn't leaned over too far. Wind protection is kind of an interesting thing. You can see that smaller windshield there. Let me just jump on the bike for a second. We'll talk about wind protection and overall seating position and how that affects the handling of this bike, which is really what you're looking for in a sport bike. So in my static reviews where I walk around the bike and do my walk around reviews, I do seating position in there. And again, it's different when you're sitting on a bike like I am right now. You can sort of show the lean angle. One thing I will say is the overall tuck position in this bike is fine and it's doable, but it's not super sport-like. This handlebars come back far enough that it's just not quite like you would have on a super bike where you can really get down. So if you want to get in a tuck position, you can, but your hands are certainly closer to you. That closer to your hand position does make it comfortable. Now, with the wind protection, like I was talking about, what seemed to be for me when I started to put my hand up and down through the wind protection there is it definitely hit lower than my helmet, so there was some wind up around this area, but it also seemed like there was some wind around the tank area, that something's wrapping around and coming into this area here. So it almost felt like you had a little bit of wind cooling you on your tummy, you had a little bit of wind cooling on your upper chest, but the center section had some wind taken away. That's an interesting thing for me. Usually once there's wind stops, you kind of have that little bit of airflow, but not the pressure, but it seems like somehow they're letting wind through. Now I noticed there is an opening through the section here, and that might channel some wind around here. Again, it does keep you cool. It's not something that puts a lot of pressure on you, but it is a bike that doesn't have a whole lot of wind protection. It has your helmet in the clean air, which is what I prefer. It doesn't buffet me, although I can feel if I move the head down the right way that you would have some buffeting. So if you're really short, you may want to tweak out that windshield, but I still think it's going to be good for most riders. Overall seating position, like I said, is very upright. Now, often in these upright positions, you don't feel as connected to the bike as you would a little bit more leaned over in corners, but that's not the case with this bike. Like I said, your legs are very connected to the bike. Your steering is very precise, very accurate. You can pick the exact line you want on this bike and hold it, and that is something that's really nice. It feels narrow, your whole body feels connected to it, and it really corners well. It's a very good handling bike. It's the kind of bike that, like I said, for street sport use, feels very sporty, but it's very confidence inspiring and something I would absolutely take to the track as well. Even though it's got more power than some of the lower level sport bikes you may want to learn on the track, it's so confidence inspiring. It's just an easy bike to ride because you very much feel connected with it, but it's also something that I think experienced riders are going to find that ease of use makes you feel like a better rider than you are. You can really feel connected, you can really hold the line. That's a real strong point to this bike. So let's wrap up by talking about who this bike is for. And one of the key standouts with this bike is it really gives you the handling, suspension, braking, and cornering ability that you would expect. It's sort of above average in all of those categories. But the big thing that stuck out with me about this bike is it gives you everything you could want, from the riding modes, the traction control modes that are easy to use, clear enough dash that's easy to work with. It also gives you the quick shifter. All of the technology is there that you could possibly want in any everyday kind of bike, but it also gives you that handling perspective that is super fun, and the whole thing comes together in a very easy to ride package. Now, sometimes easy to ride can end up being boring for experienced riders, but the precision of this, I think, allows it to be a great bike. If you had one bike that you wanted to keep for a long time, this thing really nails it. And when I ride this bike, my first impression, again, this is the first impressions video, or the riding impressions video, but my first impression with this bike is there's really nothing wrong with it at all. You could switch to another bike or a competitive bike because you prefer something about that bike. Something like the R7 has a more aggressive riding position. We'll talk about that in the future as well. But really what you're getting with this bike is a truly enjoyable bike with all the features that you want at a good price as well when you consider all the features you get. So it's very hard not to recommend this bike. If you're on the fence about this bike and another bike in the class, I would have no problem saying to you, get this bike, you will enjoy it. It is a thoroughly enjoyable bike with all the features that are class competitive. It's very enjoyable to drive. Everything works so well. So when we talk about who this bike is for, like I said, it is so easy to ride. I could almost recommend it to beginners. Certainly mature beginners could start out on this, drive it in the C mode, the conservative type mode, and you'll find a bike that's easy to ride and you can certainly grow with. Generally speaking, I think it has too much power for beginners, but it is as easy to ride as any beginner bike out there, with the exception of that power, but it's not an intimidating power. It is a thrilling power. And like I said, this is a bike that you could buy once and keep for a long time. It has all the power you could want on a sport bike. It gives you all the handling you could want on the street. And really, if you're getting into a super sport bike, the handling benefits of those bikes are not going to be seen on the street over a bike like this. The power benefits of those bikes are not really going to be seen over a bike like this until you head to the track. And that makes this bike probably, in fact, I will say definitely, my favorite middleweight sport bike that I would choose for myself. So if that sounds like something that would fit you, then by all means, this is the bike for you. Like I said, you can package the power differently. Some bikes have power higher in the rev range. Some bikes have a little more aggressive seating position, but as a general everything bike, wow, this thing is enjoyable. It is absolutely a bike I would recommend, and it is the bike I would choose in that middleweight sports segment. It's everything you could possibly want in a sport bike, and if that's not a glowing endorsement, I don't know what it is. Hey, I can't promise I can't be unbiased. If I like a bike, I'm going to tell you about it. So there you go. There is my review of the Suzuki GSX-8R, and the only thing I think wrong with this particular bike is I really like that yellow paint scheme. That yellow paint scheme I think completes this as a true standout sport bike, but this one blends in a little bit more. If you like it, it's available right now at McLean Sports. Link is in the description. And thanks everybody for watching. We'll catch you in the next one.